All right. Good morning, everybody. Today's Daf Pei Daled and Pei Hey. So we got to the Mishnah on top. So Zok the Mishnah, 3 lines from the top on Pei Daled and Aleph. It says Kol Nechel B'Shor Agadol Yechel B'Gedi Harach. Anything that's eaten, any part of the animal that's normally eaten by an ox, a large ox, can be eaten, is considered to be meat when it comes to the Korban Pesach, when they use a young gedi, right, a young goat, a young kid. Because there might be some things, we'll soon see in the Gemara, some things that basically in a larger animal are too hard and too tough to eat, and that's not considered to be meat. So the same, whatever those parts are, also apply to the gedi, perhaps even though the goat might be, smaller, softer, and then maybe those things might be edible in a goat, but nevertheless, you go basically according to the parts of a large ox. And that's the end of the shoulders. Right? And also the other cartilage found in the animal, I guess in different, joints. So let's see the Gemara. So that was the Tana. So it says Rabba. So Rabba said, what do you mean? It's a stira. Tanan, one Mishnah, in the beginning of the Mishnah, it says, it sounds like if something is too hard in the large animal, then it can't be eaten in the smaller goat. But the Sefer says, right? The end of the shoulders and the cartilage, right? It sounds like those are right? But those are too hard when it comes to shor gadol, but when it comes to the goat, they are soft. So it sounds like the end of the Sefer saying the soft parts are okay in a small gedi. So rather, Rabba learns our Mishnah as a machlokes tonight. There's actually 2 different opinions. The first opinion is and the second opinion is the shoulders and the cartilage are okay. However, that which is too hard cannot eat it. And some say and some say no, that even parts in a smaller animal which are edible, those are considered to be basar, and that the person can be, fulfill, or you can count people in terms of those parts of the meat for the Korban Pesach. And Rava disagrees with Rabba. What does he say? He says no. Mahen Ketani. It says no. What are we referring to is the format of the Mishnah. This is what it means to say. Anything that's eaten in a large shore, when it's shilka, right? When it's soaking, when it's cooking for a long period of time, then you go ahead and eat that roasted. In other words, basically a larger animal, since it's tougher. But if you go ahead and you roast it you don't roast it, right? You go ahead and you cook it for a long time in water, then that can become edible. So those parts that need to be cooked in water with a larger animal can be roasted with the smaller gedi. What are those? Those are rosh and kafayim v'asusim, right? That is the end of the shoulders and the cartilage. And Tani Kvasi the Rabba, we have a brayso in support of Rava, which is the second opinion. Anything that can be edible through cooking in a large shore can be eaten, basically roasted with a small gedi. What are those? That is the end of the shoulders, right, and the cartilage, and also different sinews that are soft. Those are considered to be like basar. Those are considered to be like meat. Fine. Itamar. Speaking of those last 2 things, gidib shesayf and likashas, right? The different sinews that in the end will ultimately become, hardened as the animal gets bigger, right? So you can go ahead and count on them for Pesach, right? As you have only a certain amount of kazesim in an animal, right? So you can include that as the meat of the animal to include more people, right? If they have, 10 kazesim including that, you can get 10 people, up to 10 people on the count. And Reish Lakish Amar ein nimnim alehem Pesach. Reish Lakish says no, you can't use that. That's since those ultimately harden, right, as the animal gets older. That's not really considered to be basar. Rabbi Yochanan Amar nimnim alehem basar hashta azlina. Rabbi Yochanan says you can go ahead and count people because we look at it now. Right now it's soft, and therefore we can go ahead and include people. And Reish Lakish Amar ein nimnim alehem. No, we can't go ahead and include people for that because basar lazina. We go ultimately it hardens, and since it hardens, it's not considered to be basar. It's not considered to be basar. Then we can't have that to be people's portion for the Korban Pesach. even though it only hardens, right? Later as the animal matures, when it's a couple of years old. So Esvei Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish argues, asks a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says you can include it, even though it's right now Rabbi Yochanan says since now it's soft, you can use it now. So if you look at our Mishnah, right? Our Mishnah says anything that can be eaten in a large animal, in a large shore, can be eaten with a gedi, right? Such as the shoulder blades, right? The end of the shoulders and the cartilage. So hani in aval kidin shesefan kashas lo. But our Mishnah did not list those items. So since it didn't list those items, l'chayra, those are not included. Those can't be counted as basar. So Amalei, so he says no. Tana he says Amalei says no. Tanahani says this. But it's not just the Rosh Hashanah and the Schusim and nothing else. Rather, also other things. V'hai my time. So why the Bedafka say the cartilage and the end of the shoulders? Because those are types of things that are eaten when cooked for a long time when it comes to a large shore. So too, since these items are things that if they're cooked in a large shore for a long time, therefore that can be eaten or roasted for a small gedi for your current Pesach. And Omerle, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Avin, ki azlis l'kamei de Rabbi Abi Ramile. So Rabbi Yirmiyah told Rabbi Avin, he says, when you go before Rabbi Avo, ask him this question. Mi Omer Rabbi Yechanan gidin sheseven l'kasha nino l'em Pesach. Right? Did Rabbi Yechanan say that different sinews then ultimately will harden those, even though right now they're soft, those can be used, right? Can be counted as the meat for the Korban Pesach. Alma, basar hashtaslina. So according to that, we see that he goes after the current status of the gedi, how soft the meat is now. Or harosh egel harach. But didn't Reish Lakish ask Rabbi Yechanan regarding the hide on the top of the head of a small egel, of a small calf? So mahu sheyitma, can that become tummy or not? It says it's not tummy. Alma basar. It does not become tummy because it's not considered to be basar, right? Basar becomes tummy, but if it's not considered to be basar, then it wouldn't be tummy. So if he holds it's not tummy, so that he doesn't go about in terms of the current status, even though right now it should be considered to be basar. Right? He says no. He who asked this question, right? He was not concerned about his flour. He really wasn't paying attention. What do you mean? Because over there he answered Reish Lakish, right? And he said over there that which he said, right? That it was mutter. That was only when he did enechanami. Yes, he did teach it, but over there he was since chayzer. And that over there, when he taught that it's not tameh, right, was only according to a lashon yachid, right, an individual, right, one lashon yachid meaning one person. That was a das of one shita, but everyone else held that you do not, right. Everyone else that it does not become is not like the end, rather it's like now, and therefore that would actually become Tameh, and therefore that was only a Das Yachid that he taught, and therefore don't ask me a kasha on that case. Fine. Naya Mishnah. So the Mishnah over there on Pei Dalad Amud Aleph, towards the bottom, 3/4 of the way down. So Hashaver Etzem Bepesach HaTahor, we saw this earlier. One who goes ahead and breaks a bone of a Pesach, Korban Pesach, which is Tahor, right, which is Tahor, which is fit, which is not tameh, right, which is fit to be eaten, and then you break one of the bones, harei ze loike arbaim. That person gets malchus, right? The malchus, it says, right, etzem lo yisisrubo, a bone, right, you shall not go ahead and break, and therefore, if you break a bone, you have violated that lav, and therefore you get malchus. Aval hameiser b'tahor, but one who goes ahead and leaves over, right, tahor meat, separate case, right? He leaves over, he has his Korban Pesach and he leaves over some meat to the morning, is one case. Or v'hashaver b'tameh, or he breaks a bone of the Korban Pesach, but the Korban Pesach was tameh. Eina like esarbayim. Those two cases you do not get malchus for. You do not get malchus for breaking a bone of a korban which is tameh, or leaving over tahor Korban Pesach. Now, Let's see this Gemara. Let's see why some cases you get malchus, other cases you do not. Zok the Gemara. So Bishlam Meiser B'Tahor. I understand the case of Meiser B'Tahor that you do not go ahead and get malchus. The time it says over there, license ad boker, Bahan Meiser ad boker Beish Tisrofu. All right, that was just there in the pasuk. Well, I don't know, showing off a little bit because my bar mitzvah parsha is only one parsha I know, right, in Torah, sadly. But anyway, so the point is that you can't go ahead and leave over the meat, and if you do, it tells you what to do, right? So even though the Torah gave you loisase, it tells you how to go ahead and fix it, right, with an asay. It says if don't leave it over. And if you leave it over, burn it. So that's called basically a lav shenisak le'aseh. It's a lav that's fixed by an aseh. In any case like that, in any case like that, you don't go ahead and get malchus. Therefore, it teaches you don't get malchus. It's a rule, right? If it tells you don't do something, but fix it this way, you don't get malchus for doing it, right? Like stealing, don't steal. But if you go, and the heishivas exela return this stolen object, so it teaches you don't get malchus for exela. Tivi Rabbi Huda, that's been Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Yaakov, no, lo mishin uzeh. You don't need this reasoning for that. Right? But rather no, the reason is because when you leave over something, it's a lav shein b'maisa, right? There is no action of leaving over. You don't actively leave it over. You just don't do anything. So if you don't do anything, you can't get malchus for being passive or doing nothing, and therefore you don't get malchus there. So everyone agrees you don't get malchus in the case of you leave over meat of the korban pesach to the next morning, a good kosher korban pesach. You have to go ahead and burn it. Now the question is, Ella Shaver B'Tamim Minal. And how do you know Shaver B'Tamim? The pasuk says, "Ve'etzem loisis rubo, bo b'kosher v'loy b'pasel." So it says, don't leave it over, but in it, right? This type of korban pesach, i.e., a kosher korban, but something which is not kosher, i.e., it's not fit, that you don't violate for breaking the bone. Okay, so therefore, only if it's good and you break the bone, then you're chayiv. If it's not good, it's tameh or whatever. We'll have other reasons. We'll soon see the Gemara. We'll get into. Then you're pater. Now, Tana Rabbanan. That's unless it's true. Bo b'kashav le'b'pasel. So as we just said, the Brisa says every bone you should not break in it with a kosher korban pesach when I had a pasuk. Rabbi Omer says v'vayis echad yechal v'etzem lo'is bo. The pasuk says, right? The pasuk, which the pasuk which brought on the side v'vayis echad yechal. Right, in one house you should eat loy tzitzim min habayis. Don't take it out of the bayis. Min habasar from the right from the min habasar chutza, right, and don't take any of the meat out of the house. Right. We'll get to that issue later on. Right. So eat it in a house. Don't take it outside. I.e., don't mix groups. Right. That's what we talk about. And then it says the etzem, a bone, you should not go ahead and break. Right. So what's the shaykhus between the two? Right, according to Rebbe, right? So since we're talking about eating, so anything which is fit to eat, anything that is kosher to eat, i.e., it's a kosher korban, then you're chayiv for shvirat from breaking the bone. But something is not fit for achila, ein bo mishum shvirat etzem. Then there is no shiras atzim. So it sounds like Rebbe is basically saying the same thing as the Tanakama, right?
There's no different of tameh shvirat habon of tameh animal to shvirat habon of tahor animal because it's not used. You see what I'm saying? So that's why it's not avera. It's not malchus. Well, so it's a different category. It's a category that you can't be used. That's it. So even if it's tameh or not tameh, I mean, if it's tameh animal and you do shvirat habon or not kosher animal and you do shvirat habon.
But this pasuk is only talking about the korban pesach. When it comes to other korbanos, there is no issur to break the bone. If you have a korban chatas or a shlamim or anything else, there is no lav. This is a unique korban where he says you cannot break the bone only by the korban pesach. Right, that's the rule. And the question is, what does it apply to? So the Tanakama says something which is kosher and not puzzle. Rebbe says something which is fit to eat and not fit to eat. Right, it has to be fit to eat, and then you have shviras atzem apply. All right.
Yeah.
So now the Gemara says, now here comes the question. My benayu, such a simple question. What is the nafkamina between the two? What's the difference between the two shitas? We have 8 terutzim. And then bring a bryce at the end, which will basically support for them. So, my benayu, right? That's going to be the question. My benayu, what is the nafkamina between the two? Isn't it the same thing? Something which is kosher, not puzzle, versus something which is regular or not? So, my benayu. So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Pesach haba b'tumah yikabenayu. Maybe you can say like this: a Korban Pesach that's baba tuma, right? Let's say we're talking about a Korban Pesach where everybody's tummy that year, right? So everyone's tummy, so therefore we're going to tuma. So Laman Demar Kasher, the one who says it's Kasher, turn the page. Hi, so he says hi puzzle, right? Well, this is actually puzzle, right? It's not Kasher, it's actually puzzle, but this year it's hutra, right? And Laman Demar Royachila, hi Namar Royachilu, right? But and if you're saying if it's fit to eat, this is fit to be eaten because this year it's fit to be eaten. So that was one nafkamina according to Rabbi Yirmiyah. However, Rabbi Yosef Omar Ki Gavna, and now this is going to be the way we're going to do it, or not the way we're going to do it. This is how the format of the Gemara is, right? The Gemara is going to basically suggest a teretz, and then the next Amora is going to come and say, no, in that case, everybody agrees it's something else. So he says, Rabbi Yosef Ki Gavna, in this case, in other words, when everyone brings Batuma, Kol Alma, Ein Bo, Mishum Shur Atzam, right? Nobody holds, right? There is no Isra of Shiras Atzem. Why? The Rebbe Akuli Kasi, because Rebbe is actually coming to be Makel. That which when Rebbe says Rabbi Lachila, he's not coming to be Machmer, right? And say there is Shiras Atzem. Rather, he's coming to be Makel. The high puzzle, right? And it's puzzle. So everyone agrees that there is no Bishur Shiras Atzem. Ella Haisala Shasa Kasha. Rather, maybe the Shas like this. Let's say it had a Shasa Kasha. Let's say the Korban was a good Korban, and then it was good. They brought it in the afternoon on the 14th. It comes the night, and becomes puzzle sometime during the night of the 15th. So that's the case. Laman Dimer Kasher, according to the one who says it has to be a Kasher Korban HaKasher, right? At one point, it was Kasher, and therefore there is an Isra Shiratz Atzem, right? Well, Laman Diyama Roy Lachila, but however, the one who says it has to be Roy Lachila, then it's not Roy Lachila. You can't eat it anymore because it came puzzle. So therefore, that's not the meaning between Rebbe and the Rabban. And Abai Yomar, no. Kuli Alma, no, everyone agrees. Kol Ki Gavna Ein Bo Mishuras Atzem, right? There is no Isser of Shuras Atzem in this case. My time, what's the reason? Hashtamiya saw puzzle it because we said it became Tomei. It became puzzle. So therefore, there is no Isser of Shuras Atzem. So if that's the case, what's the machlokes between Rebbe and Tanakama? Ela Shuras Atzem mi by Yomi Kebenayu. What about this case? According to Rebbe, right? Rebbe says Shuras Atzem if the bone breaks and before Pesach starts, right? Let's say the bone broke, right? The bone is broken on the end of the 14th, right? You bring the Korban Pesach, let's say at 2:00 in the afternoon on Erev Pesach. Pesach doesn't start till 6 p.m., right? So we say maybe that's Lamad Yomer Kasher HaKasher Hu. According to the one who says it's Kasher, Lamai said this is a Kasher Korban, and therefore it should be Chayiv. Well, Lamad Yomer Roy Lachila, right? Hashtalah Barachilu. But the one who says Roy Lachila, well, you can't eat it yet on the 14th. So therefore, since you can't eat it on the 14th, therefore you wouldn't be Chayiv for Shvirat Esem if it broke if you broke it Erev Pesach. So Meis Ve'esu Kasha says Rabbi Yomer Nimnim Al Moich Shebarosh Nimnim Al Moich Shebakolos. You're allowed to go ahead and include people for the Moich, the Marach, right? The marrow that's in the head, but you can't go ahead and include people for the marrow in the bones of, let's say, the thigh or the legs. Now, Amok Shabarosh my time. What's the reason why? In other words, remember, we're talking about if you have 14 kazesim of meat in this animal, right? You can have 14 people on our Korban Pesach. If we include the marrow, I can get more people in, right? So you're allowed to include the marrow. That's considered basar, only of the head, but not in the legs. Why is that? Amok Shabarosh my time. You can go ahead and you can pull it out without having to go ahead and break the bone. Now, if you would think you're allowed to go ahead and break, you're not high for breaking it before Pesach starts. So even the leg also. Go ahead, break it on Erev Pesach, right? Then you use all the marrow in the legs, so you have another 2 kazesim, let's say, of marrow. I can include more people. Elamai, it must be you're not allowed to go ahead and break the bone on Erev Pesach, so you must be high for that. So Abaye, who he was the one who said, "Oh, the nafmin is when you break it during the day." He says, "I lutamech to you, even when it becomes dark, go ahead, have a fire there, and go ahead and basically burn a hole to it and let it fall out, and let it come out, and include people." One who goes ahead and he burns the bones or he cuts the sinews, there is no promise shiras etzem, right? It's only breaking the bones and not burning the bones. That's not an issue. We're ready to say, right? The reason is because we're worried if you go ahead and burn it, right? You might go ahead and crack it. Rav said, no, you can't burn it because you might, in addition to burning the whole, you might burn some of the meat, and the kamasilo b'yadayim, and therefore you're actively, right? You're actively, destroying some of the meat, and therefore it's going to go ahead and take from, it's going to take out some of the, some of the meat, and you're not going to have it. So therefore, so too, right? So too, when it comes to doing it on Erev Pesach, the reason why we say, okay, just go ahead and break the bone, right, and then take out the marrow then is because if we allow one to go ahead and break the bone, which maybe according to Bai is completely right mutter, right, according to one opinion, according to Rebbe, right, so if we go ahead and break the bone on an Erev Pesach to get the marrow out to include people might forget to do it, and they will go ahead and now break it on Pesach, and they'll violate breaking the bone. Fine. Next, teretz. Rav Papa Omar, and Rav Papa says, "Kol ki agavna, kuliyama yesh bo shirsetza." This case of breaking in Erev Pesach, everybody agrees. It's not a machlokas that one says you can, one says you can't. Of breaking it on breaking a bone on Erev Pesach, my timer. What's the reason? Because at night it's fit for eating. It's fit for eating. So don't say, oh, since it's not roy lachila. On Erev Pesach, therefore you can go ahead and break it. No, it's fit for eating because you wait till the night, it's going to be fit for eating. We're talking about an aver, right? A limb, which we're going to discuss on the second blot of today, a limb that goes beyond the area which is allowed to be eaten. Right, the kachi kalam, anything certain karbonos cannot be removed from Yerushalayim, including the Korban Pesach is that. So let's say one of the limbs went beyond the walls of Yerushalayim. So if part of it went out, so madam or kosher, one who says it's kosher, how kosher who? So lamaisa, it's still kosher. The korban is still kosher. Therefore, there is a problem of shvis atzim. Well, madam ralachila, one says it's fit for eating. Halav rachilu, since it went outside. And part of it went outside, so therefore that bone, right, since part of it went outside, is no longer fit for eating, and therefore you would be chayav. Kedetani is learned Brisa. Rabbi Shmuel ben Osha, Rabbi Yechim ben Baruch Amir. Aver sheyatza mitzasa ushvaro, a bone that went out, and then it broke. Ein bo mishum shiratzatza, right? So therefore, there is no problem with shiras etzem, and that would be according to Rebbe, because it's not considered to be a barachilo. It's not fit for eating because it went out, and therefore there is no playa shiras etzem. However, according to Tanakama, it would be a problem. And Rav Sheshes berei Davidi Amar, no, kol ki agavna. This case, if part of it went out, kuli alma ein bo mishum shiras etzem. Even the Tanakama will hold it's not considered to be shiras etzem. The high aver who puzzle, because this limb, this bone, is now considered to be puzzle. Excuse me. We're talking about maybe the broken bone of one that was only roasted partially. Now it has to be completely roasted. If it's only roasted partially, then it's that's the machlokes between Tanakama and Rebbe. Man demer kosher. How kosher who? The one who says it's kosher, he says it's kosher, and this animal's still kosher, and therefore you be chai for sure. Well, the one says fit for eating. It's not fit for eating because it wasn't roasted properly. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Omar, no, kolki agavna yesh mo shviras. Even if it's partially roasted, no, there is shviras so high. So my time, what's the reason? Right? Because it's fit for eating. Why? Go ahead and roast a little more, and then you can eat it. Ella shviras aliyah ikbanai. Rather, we're talking about the breaking of the aliyah, right? The bone, right? Now, the bone of the tail. The bone of the tail is the difference. Now, when it comes to the tail of a sheep, right? That's a little unique, right? That bone is a fatty tail, and therefore that fatty tail is normally considered to go on the mizbeach, as opposed to other animals that don't have fatty tails, such as goat or cows, right? Those tails are treated differently. So now over here, we're talking about the fatty tail, right, of the sheep. So laman dem are kosher. The one now, if you break that bone, according to the one who says is kosher, remember, an animal is kosher, you're chayiv for breaking the bone, but if it's possible, you're not. So laman dem are kosher, ha kosher who, right? So this animal was considered to be a kosher animal, and therefore you be chayiv for breaking the bone. And the one who says anything that is fit for eating, so this part of the animal, this sheep, is not fit for eating. Why? Right? Because the fatty tail is supposed to go on the mizbeach. So therefore, the breaking of this bone is not something which is roy lachila, because it's supposed to go on the mizbeach. And therefore, since you break something which is roy mizbeach, it's not roy lachila, and therefore you be patur. And Ravashi Omar, and Ravashi says, no, kol ki agavna vaday ein bo mishum shvetz etzem. No, if you go ahead and you break the tail of a sheep, which is supposed to be burning his back, and you break that bone, that everyone agrees it's not shvetz etzem. Why? It's not fit for eating at all. Ella aver she'ein alav kazayis basri kabanayu. Rather, maybe we're talking about a limb that there is not a kazayis meat on this bone. So Laman Demer Kasher, the one who says kosher, a kosher animal, hakasher, this animal is kosher, even though, despite the fact there is not a kazayis of meat on this bone. Laman Demer, the one who says it's fit for eating. So being a shirachila of veleka, right? Fit for eating, meaning on this bone you have to have a shear, a proper amount of basar on it, and therefore you don't have a basar full of a kazayis, and therefore you be patur. And Ravina says no, kol ki gavno. Lesbe mishum shvetz etzem, right? If you have a bone without a kazayis of meat on it, then everyone agrees that since there is no minimum shear of a chila, you'd be pater from breaking the bone. Ella aver she'ein alav kazayis basar. Rather, what are we talking about? A limb. There is not a kazayis of basar, but makom zeh. The yesh alav kazayis basar makom acher kunayu. Right? Then is the area where you break it. There is not a kazayis of meat, but in another area of this bone, there is. So Lamad are kosher, hakasher. The one that says is kosher because Lamai said if you take the entire bone is kosher. And Lamad Diamaray the one that says fit for eating. So being shira achila b'akom shvira, you need the amount of achila at the place where you eat it. And therefore, b'halakin, you don't have it in that place. And therefore, Rebbe would say you're patur in that place because the area where you break it, there is not a kazayis of basar there. All right, so those were the 8 opinions. All right, those of you who have the art scroll, right, there's a little summary, number 27, footnote there, which says the different opinions. And now we have a brisa, Tanya Kvase Binayu, right? We have a brisa that's going to be actually gives an example of 4 cases where there's going to be a nakmina, basically will support 4 of these Tanayim. Or Amoraim, excuse me. The Tani Luna Brisa. Rebbe Yomer. It says Vayis Echad Yechel, which is brought from the Brisa of Esem Losis Rebo. Says in the same pasuk, it says eat in one house, don't leave the house, and then it says don't break a bone. So Al Ha Kosher Chayiv Eino Chayiv El Apostle. So it says over there something which is a kosher, then you're chayiv for. But if it's puzzle, then you're not chayiv for. And what's that? So then he gives some examples, Rebbe's, and these examples are some of the rhyme are supported by it. So Haisel Shasa Kosher. Such as, right, if it had a Shasta Kasher, which is one of the earlier opinions we saw, I think it was the second one, right? If it was Haisa Shasta Kasher, and then it became puzzle when it's time to eat it, right? It became puzzle later on. There is no Isra of Shves Etzem, right? And Yeshbo Shir Achila, and if there is a Shir of Achila, Yeshbo Shir Etzem, Aimbo Shir Achila, Aimbo Shir Etzem. But if it has the amount of the Shir Achila on the bone, right, then you're chayiv for. If not, you would not be chayiv for. Haroil mizbeach emo shir etzem. That was referring to the tail, right? If it was fit for the mizbeach, then there is no. If you break the tail, then there is no shir etzem. And then it says b'shas achila during the time of the eating. Yesh shir etzem, i.e., if it happens on Yontif, but it happens before. Aval shalom b'shas achila, but if it happens on the 14th on erev Pesach, then emo shir etzem. Then there is no breaking the bone. And so therefore, that brisa had 4 suggestions of Rebbe, which were 4 of the opinions of the Amorai. Fine. Itamar. New case. Fine. So towards the bottom of Pei Dalan and Beis, so was it 6? Yeah, 6 lines from the bottom. Itamar. Aver she'ein alav kazayis basar b'makom zev yesh alav kazayis basar b'makom acher. Right? We mentioned this earlier. You have a limb that it doesn't have basar in one area, but it has basar on another area of the bone, and he's going to break it. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Yesh Ba Mishum Shvetz Etzem. Rabbi Yochanan says you're chayiv for breaking it. Rabbi Shimon Lagash Aimer Ein Ba Mishum Shvetz Etzem. There is, you can break it. There's no problem with Shvetz Etzem because there is no kazayis basar in the makom of the shvira, the makom of the break. So Esvei Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan is a Kashan Reish Lakish who says that's mutter, right? The etzem lo yisis rubo, a bone should not break it. Echad etzem sheish lav kazayis basar, ve'echad etzem shein lav kazayis basar. Whether it has a kazayis of basar or not. So my ain love kazayis basar. What does it mean when it says it doesn't have kazayis basar? Ilem the ain love kazayis basar klal. If it means it doesn't have any meat at all, amai yish mashum shirat etzem. Why would you possibly think that there is shirat etzem? Elav. Anytime I rather must say like this. Echad etzem sheyesh lav kazayis basar makom zev. Echad shein lav kazayis makom zev. Yesh lav kazayis makom acher. So rather means that it doesn't mean there's no meat at all. That'll be pashut, right? Rather talking about a case of where there is no meat in one area, but there's not enough meat by the makom of the shvira, but there is meat in the other area. Then you're chayiv. So it's a kasher Reish Lakish who says you're chayiv, and Reish Lakish says there is no isser of shviras etzem. There is no problem of breaking the bone. So Omar Leis with the parentheses. So he answers top of the page. Lo hachi kamar. This is what it means to say. Echad etzem sheyesh alav kazayis basim mibachutz. The echad etzem she'ein alav kazayis basim mibachutz. Ve'yesh alav kazayis basim mibifnim. If you have a bone, right, whether it is that it has meat on the outside, a kazayis of meat on the outside, or it has a kazayis of meat on the inside, i.e., it has marrow, right, the marrow on the inside. But makom shvira, if it's in the area where you're going to break it, right, and or in other words, there's marrow by makom shvira. But tiny we're going to break. So the etzem losis rubo. It says over there, you shall not go ahead and break the bone. So echad etzem yeshava moach, v'echad etzem shiva moach. So we learn from over there whether or not it has marrow. In other words, whether it's on the outside or the inside is the meat. And what do I learn from the pasuk? It says you shall eat the basar on this night. So basar sha'al gabi etzem. Oh, and ela basar shebezach esem. When it says you should eat meat on that night, okay. So one pasuk says the first pasuk of etzem is rubo is talking about both meat on the outside and the inside. And then it says you should eat meat on that night. So which meat are we talking about? Are we only talking about meat on the outside of the bone? Or whether we're talking about also basar inside the bone, right? The marrow. If that's the case, what does it mean when it says the bone you should not go break? So maybe that's coming to teach you a bone that doesn't have any marrow. But maybe if you were talking about that you're allowed to go ahead and eat the meat from the inside. So how do you get meat from the inside? You have to break it, right? So maybe it's talking about that you can break it and eat it, right? So one suggestion is if we're being taught, right, that you're allowed, you can't go ahead and you're supposed to go ahead and eat meat, right? And the meat that we're telling you to eat is included the outside and the inside. So how do you get to the inside? It must be that you break it and then go ahead and eat the marrow there. Right? Don't ask, right? How can you do it, right? And maybe you have an asay dechaloisa say, right? The asay is to go ahead and eat the current Pesach, and that will push off the loisa say of do not break a bone. So maybe it's telling me I can go ahead and break a bone for the marrow inside. And then when it says the atzan loisrubo Pesach, and maybe when it's coming to say the atzan loisrubo the Pesach sheni. You can't break a bone. Maybe it's referring to Pesach Sheni. Sheni Tamalemer, but I don't need to know that from Pesach Sheni. Why? Sharei Kfar Nemer. The pasuk says Kechol Chukas HaPesach Yesu So. All the rules of the Pesach Rishon apply to the Pesach Sheni. So I don't need a special pasuk to teach me, right, that you can't break a bone by Pesach Sheni because I know that every single rule that applies to Pesach Rishon applies to Pesach Sheni. So Haviyamir. Therefore, it says you have to say Echad Etzem Sheyesh B'Moach VeEchad Etzem Sheyesh B'Moach. Therefore, you must say that no, it must be talking about that the any type of breaking is referring to both the meat on the inside and the outside, and therefore, even if a bone does not have any basar on the outside, you can still be chayiv for it because there is meat on the inside, and therefore one would be chayiv in that case. Now, and that's how Reish Lakish would answer Rabbi Yochanan. Fine. Meisvei. Says Aver, we discussed a little bit earlier. Aver sheyatza miktaso. If you have a limb that went out partially, chaysech, and there's actually a mission later on. Chaysech ad shmegil yatzem. What do? You go ahead and you cut down to the bone. Cut the meat, the bone. The kolef ad shemagil perik, and then you basically pull back all the meat that's around the bone to the joint. and then you cut it by the joint. In other words, let's say like this: you have, let's say this is the bone, okay, and let's say this is where it connects to the animal. All right, and so let's say right over here, here's the this way. Here's the wall outside Yerushalayim, and it goes right over here, one limb. Okay, so now for my knuckle, from this half is gone. So instead of just chopping right here and say, okay, we got rid of the bad, they cut all the meat here. So this is all they cut the meat, and then the bone is intact. They go ahead and they remove all the flesh from the bone all the way to the joint, and then they pull out the bone. All right, so basically the meat over here is all cut away, and the bone is completely pulled out. So the only thing you're left attaching is the meat between here, but the bone is not just broken here don't take a cleaver and just chop it here and move it. Rather, the entire bone is taken out, right? The entire bone is because we don't want to go ahead and break that bone, right? Now, but if you say that if there's meat, no meat in the area where it's being broken, but there is malkum in another place, there is no issue in bishur etzem. Why do you have to go ahead and peel back all the flesh over there? Right? Let him go ahead and basically cut off, just peel away a little bit, and then go ahead and break it off. And always break it off in an area where there is no kazayas of meat, and therefore you're allowed to break the bone as long as there's no kazayas of meat there. So by Yom Rishon Paka, Rabbi says because you might crack the bone more, and the bone might crack in areas where there is a kazayas of meat. And Rav Yidomar, because we're talking about basically a leg bone which has a lot of marrow in it, and therefore if you go ahead and you break it anywhere, there will be kazayas of basar on the inside. So Tanan Hasan, we go over there. Ha pigel, v'ha noisar, mitamines hayadayim. Pigel, right? We know pigel is considered to be something which person offers it, and he has in mind he has in mind the wrong zmanim to eat it at a certain date. So he basically ruins the korban. The kohen while offering it ruins the korban, or noisar, something which is left over, right? Mitamis Adayim. They were geyser tuma in that case, right? Those the person comes in contact is Mitamis Adayim. Rav Huna, the Rav Chizda, Rav Huna Chizda said about it. Chad Omar Pnei Chashde Kahuna. One says because we suspect these Kohanim are not so straight. We'll explain that. Some say because they're lazy. What do you mean? Mar Masnia Pigel, that which we said about the Pigel, Mar Masnia Nicer. One was said on the pigel, one was said on the nicer. Man, the masniya pigel. One was teaching about the pigel, right? He said b'shum chashte kuna because of chashte kuna. In other words, what's going to happen? The Kohen is going to go ahead and say, "Oh, I don't like this guy. He's bringing me his korban. I'm going to go ahead and make his korban pigel. I'm going to say, oh, it was an accident. I was, in other words, I'm going to think the wrong zman. I'm going to tell him he has to bring another one. They're not chayav for that. So because we're worried that the Kohen are going to do this, we're going to make them tummy. We're going to make them tummy by handling the pigel. So they're not going to want to make themselves tummy. So therefore, they're not going to go ahead and have this devious plan. So therefore, they're geyser. They said decreed that by pigel there is tuma because therefore we don't want them to make something pigel on purpose. Oman denice, and the case of the nice, because they'll become lazy. The lazy to leave it over, and if they leave it over, they don't have to deal with it. They'll become tame, and they don't want to become tame. So therefore, they're not going to become lazy. And mar masni b'kazai, so mar masni b'kabetza. Right, and also one of them taught Rav Chizda and Rav Huna. Right, one of them taught that it was a kibetza. The shear, the minimum shear of meat we're talking about is an egg's worth. Right, kibetza. Manasi kazayis. So therefore, the kibetza. The one who says it was a kazayis because the isser. Normally, the isser of something, right? Any shear of something of to be usser is the amount of a kazayis. And the other one says no, the shear is a kibetza, which is larger than a kazayis. And the reason that is when it comes to tuma, it has to be the minimum shear is a kibetza and not a kazayis. Now, question was asked regarding that. Yaitse, what about something that was taken outside its area, right? So let's say the Korban Pesach was brought outside Yerushalayim. So Gazer Rabbanim Tuma Lo. Were the Rabbanim Geyser Tuma, just like they were Geyser Tuma in the case of Pigel, right? What we said earlier, in case of Pigel, to stop the Kohanim, and in case of Neisar, so they won't be lazy, right? So, and therefore they'll be B'Tamis Yadayim. What about taking something outside? Were they Geyser in that case or not? Mi Amrina, do we say Naisar, the Gazu Tuma, the Asulatsuli when it comes to Naisar, they were geyser because they were lazy. But when it comes to taking out, so therefore it's nothing to do with laziness. Like guys, we're abundant tuma. Therefore, the abundant are not geyser tuma. Or maybe it doesn't make a difference. Oftentimes we see Naisar and Yaitse are the same halacha as something which is left over and something which is taken outside. So Toshma, come and listen. It says Aver Shiyatza Miktaso Chaysech Hachmigila Yatzam Vikalev Hachmigila the Chaysech. So we just brought this brisa, this Mishnah, which we'll see later on, a limb which went outside the mikdash. So you go ahead, you basically cut the meat there, right, and then you detach all the meat, right, from the bone, which is towards the joint, and then you remove the joint and you cut it from there. Via Martagazi Rabbanan Tuma. If you're saying that the Rabbanan Gazi Tuma, Ki Chasichle, my Havi, how come even if you go ahead and you cut it away, right, since it was attached, it should be matamayit, right? So who cares if you didn't, right? You're trying to save it, but the whole thing becomes tummy, right? So maybe, but you're allowing to do it. Must be it's not tummy. So Gemara says no. Tuma starim who? That is considered to be hidden tuma. Tuma something which is hidden, which is underneath, is not matami. So since when it's making contact is underneath, therefore it would not be tami. And the tuma sasayim lo mitamia. And therefore, tuma starim, right, hidden tuma is not matami. So therefore, the fact that it was attached, the meat, right, to the bone, right, and the part of the bone was half of it went outside the Yushalayim, and it's making contact with the meat, right? But that since all that meat was underneath the skin, therefore it's considered to be hidden tuma, right? Tuma sasarim, right, hidden tuma, and therefore that would not be matami. Ravina, according to Ravina, damar chibur yaichlin lav chiburhu ukamad infarti dami. But according to him, who holds that when it comes to food, it's not considered to be attached, and therefore, Michael Maimar, in other words, according to him, it should be matami. Right? How did it become matami? It should be matami. So therefore, if you hold that it's tami, it should be matami. So maybe it's matami in this case. Ella lamad damasni kazayis, according to the opinion who holds that we're talking about, we said earlier, man was machlokes between Rav Huna and Rav Chizda. One said a kazayis, one said it's kabetza. So the one who says a kazayis, the less big kazayis. We're talking about a case of there was not a kazayis of basar. Therefore, since there wasn't a kazayis of basar, therefore it would not be matami. And that's why we're telling you how to go ahead and remove the bone properly without breaking it. The less big kabetza. Also, according to the opinion who holds that it needs a kabetza, we're not talking about a kabetza worth of meat. Fine. Toshma. Come on, listen. Hamaitzi basar the Pesach mechabura lechabura. One who goes ahead and removes a Pesach from chabura. So now you can have, even let's say you get a large hotel, right? A hotel, many chaburas in there. So, but each chabura has to basically stay to themselves. They have to have their own private room. They can't be with the others. So one who goes ahead and takes the meat from one group to another, afal pishu b'loisase tahor. Right? Even though it's a leisase, it's considered to be tahor. So my lav tahor v'asur. So does not mean it's tahor, but it's asur to do, right? Because you can't take it out. And therefore, taking out from one chabura to another is just like taking outside. Just like you can't take it out. You can't take out a chabura. So too, you can't take out a Yerushalayim. So take out a Yerushalayim is the same thing as taking out of a chabura. It's the same thing. And we say, right? It's tahor, right? It's tahor. Umivson says it's puzzle. So we see that if you take it out, you take it outside the Yerushalayim, it should be no different than take it outside the Chabura. And just like over there, take outside the Chabura, it's tahor. So it's over here, you take it out of Yerushalayim, it should be tahor. So maybe that answers our question that taking out chutz Yerushalayim is not mitameh. So the Gemara says, "Lo tahor mutter doesn't mean it's tahor, but it's also means it's mutter. The yaitz mechabura lab kiyetzi chutz mechitzatzdami v'loy mivsam, because it's two completely different things, right? You don't compare the two, right? That which you say you can't take it out of the chabura is completely different than taking outside of Yerushalayim. Vaha katani safe, but it says if there's ha'eichlo harei zebleisa, say if you go ahead and you eat it. You violate a loisase from taking one group to another. We'll explain this later on. So Gemara says no. So bish lamadan the laman demer kabetza. Okay, so according to the opinion holds it's a kabetza deis be kazayis lezave kabetza. Over here, that which we say you can eat it because he holds as part to be metameyit is a full kabetza. So over here, it wasn't a full kabetza, it was only kazayis. So therefore, that which take out kazayis, it wasn't a large enough shear to become tameh. So therefore, it was mutter, he's not violating. Elaman diamer kazayis. But according to the opinion, well, is a kazayis Michael Neymar. So what do you say in that case, right? So l'chayra, if it's a kazayis already, then it should be us. It should be tummy. So Ella b'yetziv pesach loik boilan deloy gazer ban tuma. Rather, when it talks about when you go outside of the current Pesach, that's not a question. The runner not goes into Tuma. My time. What's the reason? Because Bnei Chabura is the reason. Hey, by Tuma, they didn't by Korban Pesach, they didn't need to make a gzera. They made a gzera by Pigel, right? They made a gzera by Neisar. But when it comes to Korban Pesach, to take out Yerushalayim, people there are Bnei Zrizin, right? Umizar Ziribe, and since you have a group, so therefore they're going to make sure that no one brings it outside. Elaki Kiboilan, rather we're talking about Kachim. Rather we're talking about Yaitse taking outside when it comes to Kachim, right? So what's the halacha there? So my answer is take. So we don't know, right? When it comes to a Chabura by Korban Pesach, so that's not a Shaila. That everyone holds it would be Torah, right? By other Kachim, right? Even when it comes to Kachim, when you can only eat, let's say, on the Temple Mount, right? You can only eat over there, then you can't take it outside. So maybe over there are guys or other the shlamim or the toida or other types of kachikalim that also can, if you take a shlam, is a tame, so that is take. Fine. So bottom line, umaitzi basar pesach michabura. So we said one who goes ahead and takes out meat, the current pesach from michabura, top of the page, michabura chabura, from one chabura to another chabura, minayin. So how do you know that is aser? The Tanya, we learn in the Bryce. It says, you should not take from the house, right? Min habayis, min habasar, from the meat, chutza outside. I only know you can't take it from one house to the other. Why? How do we know from chabur chabur? Tamalei chutza. Therefore, it says chutza la'achila. So outside is achila. So not only is it a problem, right? So you have, you live next door to somebody else to take over here your Korban Pesach next door to them. But even, right, if you're in the same house, there's one chabur to the other, one is upstairs, one is downstairs, then you can't go ahead and take it from in that case. And Omar Rabbi Ami hamaitzi basar Pesach michabura lechabura eino chayiv ad shianiach. How is this issur done? So if you go ahead and take meat from one chabur to the other, you're holding your leg bone, you're eating it. You're not chayiv until you put it down. In other words, just because I walk in there and I'm holding a drumstick, right, in my hand, I'm eating it, I'm not chayiv yet, right? Only ad shinech, until I go ahead, I go to the other group, hey, where are you guys holding? Oh, how long was your magid, right? Yeah, mine was 25 minutes, yeah, longer this year, right? And I put it down on your table, then I'm chayiv. Why? Because hotzah ksiv, it says over there hotzah to take it out, ksiv Shabbos. And it just like it says, hotzah also by Shabbos, right? When we can't take from one to the other, one to the other, right? So ma Shabbos ad the over akira of hanacha, just by Shabbos until I go ahead and take it over and I do a removal and I do hanacha and I place it there. Afachinami ad the avad akira v'hanacha. So over here until I go ahead and do an akira, I remove it from my table to your table, and I do hanacha and I place it on your table. I'm holding it in my hand and just talking, then that is not over the issur, according to Rabbi Ami. So Meisiv Rabbi Abba Bar Mamul Hayaseg L'Masam B'Motos. Now, they used to go ahead these karbanos. They were completely brought to the inside. When it came to the bulls and other types of karbanos, they would go ahead and they would burn on the inside, and they would bring them on the outside. And once those come out, the people would become tamei, right? Those would become tamei who would carry the bulls and the other offerings from the inside. Those would be burnt. This is the part of the Kohen Mashiach that was is burnt outside the machna, but those would carry out would become tamei, referring to these bull offerings. Now, so how you slim this up? They would go ahead and put them on poles, right? They would carry on poles, right? The animal, right? The animals that were already offered, and now they carry the meat out. So imagine you have two people, the front people and the back people. So the front people already came out past the azara, and the inside people haven't walked out yet because they're in the back of the pole. The first ones would become tamei, right? They become tamei because once they emerge, once they become outside the azara, they become tamei. The back people aren't tamei yet because they're still on the inside. They're following the end. right? It says over there, hotza, to take it out. But over there, they never put it down. We just said you have to do hanacha, right? And over there was no hanacha, and they became tamei. So who says every case of hanacha, right? Every case requires hanacha. So he asks the question, he answers, over there we're talking about they're dragging. It's dragging on the ground. If something is dragging, it's like it's being placed on the ground. So therefore, it's not a kasha. Over there it was on the ground. That's why they became tamei to their gadim. So too, still in the case of the take from one chabur to the chabur, you'd only be chayiv if you go ahead and you place it down by that other group. Fine.
Now Mishnah.
So Mishnah on Pei Hey Amud Beis. So Mishnah says, Aver. Right, I hope to get just to the top of Amud Aleph of Pei Vav Amud Aleph, a couple lines at the top. So we say, Aver sheyetzim miktaso chaysech ad shmigi eliyetzim. If you have a part, a limb that went out, we saw this earlier, chaysech ad shmigi eliyetzim, you go ahead and cut the meat until the bone. The kalif ad shmigi leparak, and then you go ahead and you basically pull away all the meat that is attached to the bone from the area when it ran out all the way to the joint. For chaysech, then you go ahead and cut it you take it out from the joint, the entire bone. And when it comes to hektish, other karbanos which do not have any sort of isser of shviras etzem, of breaking of the bone, kait says bekoifis, go ahead and take your cleaver, just chop it, boom, done. Shame over shviras etzem, there is no problem with shviras etzem. And min ha'agaf lufnim kulifnim. When it comes to the doorways, right? So from the inside of the door in, right, is considered to be inside. Umin agaf lachutz, and from the doorway out, Kilachutz is considered outside, right? We're talking about Yerushalayim and also the Azara. So the doorways to the Azara and the doorways to Yerushalayim. So from the inside, the doorway is considered in. Outside of the doorway is out. The hacholinios and the windows, and basically on the top of the walls, right? Those are considered lifnim. Inside that area, depends which one we're talking about. Now, Zok the Gemara. So Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, the Chein L'Tfila. So too applies with Tfila. In order to be counted as a minyan, right, you have to be inside. You can't be in the doorway, or anything is inside of it is inside. Anything out beyond the doorway is beyond. No, when it comes to tefillah minyan, doesn't matter where you're standing, outside, inside. Right, there is no walls when it comes to the mechitza. Everyone is considered to be all together. Now, let's look at the Gemara. So, the Gemara, it never really defined the width of the doorway. It says inside of the doorway and outside of the doorway. So, but it never really identifies what's going on in the doorway itself. So, Gubikasha, Amarta Mina Agilifnim Kilifnim. From the inside of the doorway and inside is considered to be inside. So it sounds like Ha'agaf Hatzman Kilachutz. It sounds like for the doorway itself is considered to be outside. And aim a seifa, but then you look at the seifa, it says mina agaf l'chutz, right? From the outside of the doorway beyond is considered to be outside. Ha agaf hatzman klifnim. Sounds like the doorway itself is considered to be on the inside. So where it says loikasha, kan b'shari azara, kan b'shari Yerushalayim. It's different. One is talking about the gates of the Azara, and the other was talking about the Yerushalayim. So in other words, we treat it differently when it comes to the gates of Yerushalayim, right? We're going to soon see that's going to be considered like outside. And when it comes to the gates of Zara, the inside of the door is going to be inside. Why? Why were the gates of Yerushalayim not considered sanctified, and therefore someone who was commanded to leave Chutz Lamachana could stand there? Because the Mitzarim used to go ahead and stand underneath. The Mitzarim who had commanded, they were not allowed to be there. And therefore, they just stood within the gates of Yerushalayim. And from the summer, from the heat, you have to get out of the sun, and from the rain, they would stand on to protect it. And they were allowed to stand there because that's still considered to be outside. Why was Shar Nicanor, which is unique? All the other gates were different, but why was Shar Nicanor not? Why was it not sanctified? Because over there, for part of the way of Mitzorah would have to go ahead. They would have to have the blood applied to their finger, their thumbs and their toes, and therefore, in such a case, they would apply it that way. But they were allowed to enter, so therefore, they would stand in the doorway of Shar Nicanor and enter, right, or not enter and stand there, and that was still considered to be bachutz. But all the other entrances from the sides and from the backs into the Azara, those are considered to be like the inside. It was just Shar Nicanor that wasn't because for the mitzvah, right? Fine. Just translate along. It's a couple more lines, right? When it comes to the windows and the depths of the wall, so you say Gagim Aliyas Leiskach, right? The tops, right, and the roofs and the attics, they were not miskadesh. They were not considered to be part of the sanctity of Yerushalayim. Eini, is this true? V'amar Rav Shmuel, V'amar Rav Chia, because it says Kazeisa Pischa V'Alela Paka Igra. It says over there they used to have Kazeisim and right a Kazais of the current Pesach, right, and they would say Hallel, and they would go from the roofs. So it sounds like they're eating on the roof. How could they eat on the roof? On the roofs is considered to be outside Yerushalayim. So Gemara says, top of the page of Pei Vav and Aleph. Samai lav da'achli b'igra v'amri b'igra doesn't mean that they're outside the roof eating their current Pesach and they're singing Allah. So lo da'achli b'ara v'amri b'igra. No, they would go ahead and eat downstairs on the ground floor, which was sanctified Yerushalayim, and then they would go on top and sing Hallel. So any is true. Right? What is it? You can't aim aftir, you can't have you can't eat, right, or have after the Pesach the afikomen. What's that? It means you can't go ahead and eat afterwards. You can't have your afikomen, can't have dessert, right, after you leave a chabura, because they don't want people going from a chabura to chabura, right? So you see that they weren't leaving afterwards. So how can you say that they went ahead and had the current Pesach, and then afterwards they went on top to eat the to say Hallel? They shouldn't be leaving, right? They're chabura. So like kasha, kama shasachila, kama shlozachila, right? No, talking about during shasachila or after shasachila, right? Once it was over, once the shasachila was done, right? Then they would go to the rooftops and go ahead and sing Hallel, as opposed to that which we say ein maftina achar pesach afikomen. That was referring to during shasachila, and therefore they would stay put during that time. All right, we'll stop here. So tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, we will pick up from here. I might be traveling tomorrow, so I think probably Rabbi Reese will be teaching tomorrow, so via Zoom. So, all right, shkoyach. So tomorrow morning, Mitzvah Shem, same time after davening. Shkoyach.